Welcome to Legendary Physique. I'm Richard Baldwin, your host, and I'm talking to Jerry Brainum about his April Applied Metabolics newsletter, the only newsletter I trust for the latest information on nutrition and exercise. Jerry, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. Just had another CAT scan of, as I discussed in the last video that we
Yeah.
did last month, I had this diverticulitis problem.
Last time I talked to you, gained, I think, 8 pounds back or something. How's that going?
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I returned to the gym. What was it? I guess 2.5 weeks ago, and it was almost scary. I was putting on like a pound a day, and I wasn't even eating that much. I kept on a restricted diet, low calorie, low carbs, because I figured I can't train as hard. So why would I want to eat a lot of food?
Yeah.
But despite that, I kept gaining weight, and I'm thinking I'm not getting fatter. So this weight gain,
Muscle memory.
I can't be putting on a pound of muscle a day. So I concluded that it's a combination of water and maybe some lean mass coming back, like the muscle memory, like you just mentioned.
Well, I was going to say, you might have been dehydrated too. Your muscles might be dehydrated. So because muscle has a huge amount of water in it anyway, right?
72%.
Exactly. So what you were gaining that. So I think you're actually gaining that much muscle.
Yeah, well, I was, for some strange reason, I don't know why, this particular condition, this diverticulitis, when I went in the hospital, I was severely dehydrated. I mean, severely.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I never stopped drinking fluids. I was getting IV fluids, and yet I was still dehydrated. I'm not sure of the mechanism. I'm still trying to figure that out. What is it about this that, I'm not sure. But I think, there might still be, a situation where I was leaning towards dehydration. But, depending on the results of this CAT scan, by the way, some people have asked me, maybe I should just bring it up here.
Okay.
A lot of people have asked me what caused this. And the truth is that, there's no real answer. As I mentioned, diverticuli are just outpouchings in the colon. Usually it's caused by too much pressure in the colon, meaning that the people that usually get this have trouble, like they don't eat enough fiber, they have constipation. So there's a high amount of pressure in the colon, which causes these outpouchings, which are diverticuli. If they get infected, it becomes diverticulitis, which is what I had. But I not only had diverticulitis, I had a complication. It perforated, and it caused the release of some bacteria in my gut, which caused peritonitis. I had a lot of pus and stuff in there, and I had this bloated stomach, extremely painful. But the interesting thing is, the only risk factor I had for diverticulitis was age. In other words, it peaks when you're over 60 years of age. Plus, what that is unusual in itself, since I'm only 38. I can't figure. But the other thing is that I've always, for crying out loud, I've been writing about the advantages of fiber for 40 years. I'm the last guy not to eat fiber.
Yeah.
I eat literally about 3 times the requirement of fiber. The only people that eat more fiber than me are native Africans who they eat like 100 grams of fiber.
Or vegetarians or something, huh?
And if you ate that much, you'd have to be, have a toilet knee every 15 minutes, seriously. But the thing is, as I said, my grandmother had diverticulitis. I remember many, many years ago, she had a pretty serious case. I'm thinking it was kind of like a genetic time bomb. In other words,
yeah,
I had a tendency to get this, because of the genetic factors. And, what happens is, let's face it, there's always food going through there. Your body, you're always digesting. And it's kind of like, almost comparable to a tire. If you keep driving, eventually the tread wears out in the tire, and the rubber gets thinner. And sometimes you even get a bulge on the tire. And this is what happens in the intestines sometimes, especially if you have the so that's my answer to the people asking me why this happened. I think it was just a combination of genetics. It certainly wasn't any, because I don't eat a lot of refined carbs. I don't eat a lot of junk, and I always had a high fiber. In other words, I didn't have any of the real risk factors other than genetics and the age. That's it.
Yeah.
So, in other words, the bottom line is I couldn't control it. In other words, this happened suddenly. There's nothing I could have done to control it. I couldn't, nothing. There's nothing I could have done, so that's that. But right now I feel pretty good. I got still a little bit of not crampy, but, when I eat something, even if I take 2 vitamin pills, I get a little bit of a bloat right in the colon area. I could feel it, which indicates to me there's something still wrong. It could be that, maybe there's a little residual damage to my colon. I'm not sure, but the CAT scan today hopefully will kind of, illuminate what's going on down there.
Yeah.
And also will determine whether I need to have this surgery where basically they take out the portion of the colon that has the diverticuli, the remaining diverticuli. They just basically, remove it, and then they reattach the ends. Once you do that, diverticuli is gone for life. You never get it again.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. I mean, I'll go. I mean, at this point, Richard, honestly, I was dreading. I mean, I mentioned to you, I was dreading the surgery, but at this point, my attitude, let me get this damn thing over. I mean, I'll go to have the surgery. I just want to get away from this,
Yeah, surgery sucks. I've had enough myself that I don't even like thinking about them. In fact, I sort of block them out and don't remember anything about them, even the surgeon. I forget who the surgeon was or everything.
Well, you know what the funny thing is, Richard, about this stuff is that, you ever hear that old expression, in ignorance there is bliss?
Yeah.
Which could apply to a lot of certain voters. I won't mention, what I'm talking about. But the point is that when it comes to surgical procedures, ignorance is truly bliss, because I've been reading and studying this stuff so many years that I have to admit I'm probably one of the worst surgical patients. When I had knee arthroscopy years ago, just an arthroscopy, it's no big deal. As they were wheeling me into the surgical operating theater, the nurse looked at me and noticed, she says, "You're white as a sheet." She says, are you scared? And I looked at her, I said, "Frankly, I'm terrified." She says, "Why? You have a good surgeon." I said, "Because I can't stop thinking about everything that can go wrong. It's almost like an obsessive thought, and it's freaking me out." So, in other words, in this case, not knowing all this stuff, I would have been a lot more relaxed, see? And that's the same with this surgery. I mean, I know too much of what could go wrong, and you try and block it out, but it still creeps into your brain, and,
I have to block everything out, because I can't stand being an organism.
Yeah, I know.
And that slaps you in the face with your own finitude, your own mortality, your own organic nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never took biology because of that. I always took chemistry and physics.
Yeah, I took that too because it's going to be done. But the thing is that the more you know about the aging process, let me put it this way, the more depressing it becomes, because it's like the only thing I compare it to is like a speeding car heading for a brick wall. You can do everything right, train and diet and, eat well, and that will probably extend your healthy years. Now, you notice I extend your healthy years. I didn't say anything about extending your lifespan.
Yeah.
In other words,
so much of it's genetics too.
A lot of it's genetics.
I mean, some people could smoke their whole life, and 103, they're still smoking, and never get cancer. Somebody else can do it for a couple of years and they get cancer.
Just to underscore what you're saying, that the human being that holds the record for the longest recorded lifespan was Jean Calmet, a woman in France who lived to 122 years of age. She was born in 1875. She died in 1997. She gave up smoking at the age of 101. They did some doctors. It was published in a medical journal. They did some psychological and brain scans of her when she was about 115, and they found, this is amazing, she had no signs of neurological damage. In other words, dementia, excessive, the thing that a lot of older people get, Alzheimer's. She had none of that. She was clear as a bell, but she was blinded deaf. She did lose those senses. She was blinded, and but she's actually a very happy person, and but she had a freakish situation. Her brothers and sisters all lived into their 90s, but strangely enough, she was married. She lived way past her husband. She had one daughter who died at 35 years of age.
Wow.
Imagine.
That's crazy.
You know what's interesting about that? From a scientific point of view, is a lot of your longevity is based on what they call mitochondrial DNA, and that's inherited strictly from your mother. Your father doesn't contribute that at all. So you could say that a lot of your longevity capability is based on your mother. And the thing is, Calmet's daughter had her genetics and yet still died. I think, however, I'm not sure, but I think she might have gotten some sort of, remember, this is I think it was around the turn of the century. Her daughter, I think, might have gotten some bacterial disease that they couldn't treat, so
before penicillin and all that.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have that. I mean, even what I had, diverticulitis, I mean, if I got this in the 1890s with peritonitis, forget it. I'd be dead as a doornail. I mean, that's what happened. I think I mentioned to Harry Houdini, you know, he got peritonitis and was dead less than a week later, you know, the famous magician.
Well, he got punched in his stomach and it busted his appendix, didn't it?
That's exactly what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
He used to brag about how hard his stomach was. He used to let people punch him in the stomach.
And
So
some guy caught him unawares and he didn't flex for it.
oh,
Boom.
it went well. You know, no, what happened was he was in his 50s already and still in fantastic. He was in great shape for a guy. He's like 52 years old, something like that. So some young college student went backstage. He heard about Houdini's thing about punching him in the stomach. And he said, Mr. Houdini, can I punch you in the stomach? And Houdini was an affable guy. He said, sure, kid, go ahead, you know. And you know, the guy looked at Houdini, he had gray hair. He says, I don't know, should I, you know, hold back? He says, no. Houdini says, hit me as hard as you can. So the kid reels back and punches him. What Houdini didn't know was he had appendicitis. And when the kid hit him, he burst his appendix. And the same thing happened. The bacteria, you know, got all over his gut. He got peritonitis. Again, no antibiotic treatment. He died. He was in otherwise fantastic condition, great condition. This guy would have probably lived to his 90s, this guy, because he was a short guy. Shorter people live long. Houdini was only about 5'5", if I recall. And, you know, for some, well, I know why, but I don't want to, it's too technical to get into, but let me put it to you this way. Shorter people tend to live longer. All these people that you see that, you know, 7'4", and, you know, the basketball players, I mean, I know they make a ton of money, but I guarantee you they're not going to make it to 90 years old. None of them.
Well, like you said, if people want to live healthier, they need to get your newsletter.
Yeah,
well, I like the last newsletter. I like you had a great article on type 1 and the different type 2 fibers.
Yeah.
And all those, and what, 3 other articles on natural bodybuilding?
Well, you know, that article about the muscle type training, that kind of answered a mystery that I wasn't sure of, because I think we've discussed, or I've written in my newsletter, how that, you know, this recent research that shows that light weights, if you do light weights to failure with higher reps, like 25, even up to 30 reps, you get as much
if you go to failure.
growth. Yeah, it has to be to failure, but you get as much muscle growth as lifting heavy weights, like 90% of 1 rep maximum. That's heavy weight. And I said, how could that be? Well, the reason is, first of all, you fatigue all the muscle fibers when you go to failure. That's the first reason. The second reason, and that's answered by the article that you're referring to, is that when you do the lighter weights, you're working the type 1 fibers. They used to be called endurance fibers or slow twitch. They now know they're capable of much more growth than previously believed. Yeah. So most of the growth you're getting from the light weights is actually the type 1 fibers rather than the type 2.
But you still get some type 2 after you get close to failure, and you've worn out the type 1 fiber, so it's pretty cool.
That's exactly right, and that's why you have to go to failure. Because if you don't go to failure,
you're
not going to hit it. You're not going to hit the type 2. You're only going to hit the type. You're going to hit the type 2A and 2B. But I'm sorry, 2A and 2X fibers, type 2. But it's the type 2B that grows, and the only way to hit that with light weights is to go to complete failure.
So what do you got for us in this upcoming April issue?
I got some really interesting stuff, Richard. You know,
you always do.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Okay.
Have you ever wondered to yourself, I mean, we've both been in bodybuilding for many years, and I'm sure every bodybuilder thinks about this. We're bombarded with advertisements about protein supplements, amino acids, and branched chain amino acids. You know, a lot of it must enter your mind at one point that, can I get my protein from whole food? I mean, do I have to really eat these protein supplements? Do they offer any real advantage? And that in the first article, I basically compare whole food protein intake to protein supplements, and I answer the question of, is it possible to get just as much, let's say, muscle growth and gains eating whole food proteins as it is from protein supplements? And do you need protein supplements at all if you eat whole food proteins? So that's what the first article's about.
I don't think a lot of guys in the 70s did much of the supplement stuff, other than some vitamins and stuff.
No, I remember Arnold and, well, including myself, we used to use this. Remember, we talked about this Rio Blair protein, which was a milk and egg protein. It was only 62% protein. It was loaded with lactose. So if you had any kind of lactose problem, your stomach would bloat out like a pregnant woman. But I mean,
tastes good, though.
Yeah, I mean, the choice of proteins back then was much less. I mean, you didn't really have any decent whey proteins.
Yeah.
You had like liver concentrates and meat proteins, and you had the milk and egg, cheap milk and egg, and of course you also had
Soy.
the best protein back then was egg white.
Yeah.
I mean, egg albumin protein. It was called egg protein.
Yeah.
That was the best of the day, and it was the best for many years until whey entered the picture in the early 90s.
Well, I still get most of my protein from foods, chicken and lean meat. I'll have a steak at least once a week, and then eggs, whole eggs. But I do take sometimes when I'm trying to lose weight, I'll just take a protein shake for a meal or something.
Do you eat any fish, Richard? You didn't mention fish.
I hate fish.
Oh, isn't that funny? Because that's exactly that's me.
I'm from the Midwest. It's meat and potatoes.
You are the only champion bodybuilder. Let me think. There's only one other bodybuilder. I interviewed all those thousands of bodybuilders when I worked for Joe Weider. There's only one bodybuilder who told me he hates fish.
Hey, after the Mr. Universe, when I ate tuna and water for weeks, I haven't been able to eat any fish since.
Oh my God. The only bodybuilder who ever told me that he detested fish, and because I asked him, we were talking about his pre-contest diet, I expected him to say, well, I started eating fish. And I asked him, I said, do you eat fish? He says, oh, he made a face. Oh my God. I hate fish. That's the way he said it. That bodybuilder was Lee Haney.
Oh, really?
Who won the Mr. Olympia. What was it? Was it 7 or 8 times?
8 times, I think. He beat Arnold's record. Yeah.
He hated fish. And my problem with fish is that when I competed as a bodybuilder, my lunch every day for at least 25 years was a can of water-packed tuna, 1 to 2 cans. I drain any oil.
It was albacore.
Yeah, it was albacore. But
okay.
I drain it out, and I'd eat that with let's say a half a pound of low-fat cottage cheese.
The only time I ate fish was right before 2 contests. The Mr. Florida, Mr. Universe, that's it. The rest of the time I just ate chicken and turkey and stuff.
Did you notice any real advantage from eating the fish? I mean, did it make you harder, or you think it was about the same?
I don't know, because I went so low calorie too to get ripped. It's like I didn't do enough experimenting to figure it out.
Well, the
but
thing
I got ripped, so.
Well, what people don't realize, I mean, fish is great. I mean, it has all right, get some mercury and all that stuff. There's ways to deal with that. For example, the mineral selenium. If you're worrying about mercury, if you consume selenium, the trace mineral, mercury locks onto selenium and they're both excreted out. So if you have selenium, mercury is not an issue. But here's the point. The point is that, fish has some great stuff. It's got very good protein. For some strange reason, the protein in fish tends to depress the appetite more than other proteins, although nobody knows why. And it has taurine, which is a fantastic amino acid. I mean,
but isn't eggs still the standard?
Eggs are still the standard. But here's the thing. If you look at the comparison of fat, carbohydrate, calories between, let's say, a skinless chicken breast and fish, right? The skinless chicken breast is exactly the same. In other words, there's no real advantage to eating, forcing yourself to eat fish if you can handle skinless chicken breast. You're getting the same. There's no fat in the breast. There's no carbs. One skinless chicken breast has only 110 calories. That's nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
That's what I competed with was chicken breast.
Right. So, there's the point there. But I mean,
and eggs.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'll tell you right now, there, like you say, there's an advantage of protein stuff. I go into it in the article, but like me, I don't really at this stage of the game. I don't like to force down a lot of protein foods. I just don't have the appetite for it. So I take like 1 or 2 protein drinks a day. I still do it only because it allows me to meet my protein requirements without having to chuck down a lot of food. And so that's one advantage of a protein supplement.
Well, I'm getting ready for my spring peak out. I do every spring. So that's why I'm starting to, for supper, I just had some eggs, but I did have a couple pieces of lean bacon. But I'm starting to cut carbs and, trying to get ready.
And of course, you make sure that you only eat egg whites, right?
Oh, no, I eat the whole egg.
I was testing you on that one.
I'm not dumb.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not as dumb as I look.
Some guy asked me about that the other day on Facebook.
They're still asking that question?
No, he asked me another question. He said, why he said, oh, it was about carb loading.
Uh-huh.
You know, I made a statement. I said carb loading is basically self-delusion for bodybuilders. I said all you're doing is dehydrating yourself and putting the water back. I said, and so he says to me, well, how come all the champion bodybuilders, Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler, how come they all carbo load? And I said, for the same reason that most bodybuilders still eat egg whites. Nobody ever questions the science behind it, and they just follow the leader. It's just it's a tradition, so they think it's the right thing to do. So they don't give it any thought. It's as simple answer as that.
Yeah.
So then the next article is you might remember. I don't know if you remember I forget how long ago, maybe a year ago. I did an article on the adrenal fatigue idea. The idea.
Yeah.
There are a lot of doctors and there's a lot of books around about adrenal fatigue. It's supposedly,
which is what I worry about from HIIT training.
Yeah, well, you get, basically the idea is that unrelenting stress, from various sources causes your adrenal glands to get so tired that you get very weak and fatigued, and you get all kinds of these symptoms. So basically, the problem is that there really is no medical entity known as adrenal fatigue. There is adrenal failure or adrenal insufficiency, which is called Addison's disease. But anyway, I wrote that article, and I came across an article by endocrinologists from Mayo Clinic. And they were talking. What happened was they in doing routine blood tests for their patients, they started noticing elevations of certain hormones that shouldn't have been elevated. Uh-huh. And so when they questioned the patients, it turns out these patients were all taking adrenal support supplements. And so what they did is they analyzed the adrenal support supplements, and they found some surprising ingredients. And that's what this article is about. And I talk about how certain other supplements are adulterated with hormones, that's what the second article, then, what to look out for and all that kind of stuff. And then the next article.
That's why we have an FDA, right? It's supposed to protect us.
Yeah, but they don't have enough manpower to police this stuff.
Well, and do they police health supplements?
Do they what?
Do they police the health supplements?
Well, here's the way it works. They only do that if there's enough adverse effect reports. In other words, there's a toll-free line that people can call if they take a supplement that they think caused medical problems. They could report it to the FDA. They have a hotline. If the FDA gets enough of these adverse effect reports, then they institute a investigation. But that's the only way they'll do it.
But all other food they check, don't they?
Oh yeah, meat stuff like that. That's the Department of Agriculture.
Oh, okay.
They send out inspectors. They have to do that. Which is very important because, for example, talking about meat, if they didn't do that and this mad cow disease ever got into food supply, that would be absolute disaster. It's horrible. I don't even want to talk about it. But
yeah, that was in England, wasn't it? But didn't hit here.
It was in England. Yeah. Well, 1 or 2 cases showed up in Canada. I think there was one case where they found 1 or 2 cows in the United States, but they killed the cows, and they think they got it before it spread to the other herd. So, I don't think it's ever been of epidemic proportions in the United States, as far as I know.
No, I don't think so.
But considering that one of the signs of spongiform encephalopathy, as it's known medically, is kind of dementia, or where you basically can't think straight. When I look around and see how a lot of people act, I wonder if maybe it did get But in any case,
I had lunch with some professors today, and they were saying something like the same thing.
Yeah, I'm telling you. It's like there's some sort of epidemic of stupidity in the world. But anyway, the element, the main fuel for anaerobic exercise, such as weight training, bodybuilding, the fitness, and all that, is glycogen. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, maybe I should do an article on this because it's extremely important. There's a lot of confusion about glycogen. Glycogen is basically a complex carbohydrate consisting of thousands of branches of glucose, and it's stored in the liver to a limited degree and in muscles to a limited degree. But in muscle, glycogen is your main fuel. And what this article talks about is all the science behind glycogen, ways to maximum glycogen accumulation in muscle. And I have a lot of little tricks about how to. It's also good for athletes. I talk a little about carb loading, who it actually does work for, and the best ways to do it. And so that's that article. And the final article is, I've talked about. I've had several articles about muscular hypertrophy. The best methods to induce muscle growth. And I said to myself, maybe I should do a separate article on the best methods to induce muscle strength. Muscle, as I said in that article, muscle strength and muscle growth aren't necessarily, the same.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen, I know I have, there's many bodybuilders over the years that are huge. They have huge muscles, but their strength doesn't match their muscles. One guy that comes to mind in that respect was a good friend of mine years ago, a guy named Paul Dillette. Do you remember Paul Dillette?
Huge. Yeah.
Paul Dillette, to this day, I've seen all the great. I've seen Sergio Oliva, Arnold, just about Ronnie Coleman. I've seen every huge bodybuilder that's ever existed, including Phil Heath. And I don't think I've ever seen a guy with the sheer muscle mass as Paul Dillette.
Yeah.
I mean, when he was at his best, when he flexed his arm, when he just flexed his bicep, I mean, his head looked like a pea. That's how big the freaking arm was,
He was huge.
And he didn't have a pea head. His head was normal size, just his muscles were so huge. But the thing is that Paul, when he trained, he used surprisingly light weights. I mean, off season and on season, I've never seen him lift heavy weights. And yet he had this prodigious muscle size that didn't match. But in this article, I talk about all the scientifically evidenced methods that will increase muscle strength, which of course is very important for anyone participating in sports. And it's important for bodybuilders because, as I mentioned in the article, getting stronger is a great impetus to training harder. It keeps your enthusiasm up. I mean, if you lift the same weights all the time and never show any strength gains, you can get a little bit bored. But, I remember when I made my best gains in my 20s, I was using this high intensity system where I was able to get literally stronger every 2 workouts. I mean, and it kept my enthusiasm. I couldn't wait to train because I loved getting strong like that.
Yeah, I would do that before a contest or leading up to it, but I couldn't keep that intensity that long, all year long.
Well, that's where I made my mistake. I mean, when I was doing that, after about 6 months, I remember no less than Arnold Schwarzenegger came up to me. This was the original Gold's Gym. And he noticed I was training to failure with these very heavy weights. I was able to do that back then. And he said, Jerry, he says, you can't keep doing that forever. I said, what do you mean? I said, I'm making gains. What are you talking about? In fact, everybody in the gym thinks I'm on steroids. I'm not even taking anything. I'm just training so damn hard. He says, because, even if your muscles can take it, your mind's going to burn out because every workout, you can't push that hard. Your mind, you can't do it. And I kind of said, all right, thanks, Arnold. And I brushed it aside. I said, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I said, Arnold's just too lazy to train hard, So, but the truth is, sure enough, I never even, the truth is, I mean, supposedly training to failure has a high rate of injuries. I mean, that's why Dorian Yates quit training and Mike Mensa. I never got any injuries from training to failure.
You lucked out.
But what happened was I did mentally burn out because my system mandated increasing either reps or weight every workout. In other words, if I couldn't increase the weight a little bit, I had to do an extra rep or two. And after a while, this got so taxing on you to have to fight like that I lost all interest in training. I didn't quit training. What I did is I went back to a more conventional system. And I still train to failure today, but to a much more limited extent. I don't do all my exercise to failure. But let's say I'm doing 3 sets of an exercise, right? The first 2 sets will be conventional, and again, it's like lighter weights, and I come close to failure. And on the 3rd set, I will go to failure, complete failure, till I can't put the weight. And again, they're lighter weights than I used to use, but the 3rd set's always to complete failure. And I can do this all the time. I don't burn out. I don't have any mental problems with it. This is the way I kind of train now. I find that. I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm growing like a weed, although putting on a pound a day, like I've been doing, it tells me I must be doing something right,
Yeah.
But But what this does, this system does, and this is something that should, be of interest to anyone who's over 40, is that it keeps my muscles from atrophying. In other words, even if I'm not getting much bigger, my muscles are not shrinking. Although like I say, when I lost 23 pounds in the hospital, I did lose a massive amount of muscle. In fact, my muscles were smaller than they've ever been in 35 years. But I'm slowly gaining it back now, But my muscles actually are coming back faster than my strength. In other words, my muscle size is getting a little better with each week, but I'm still incredibly weak compared to where I was before I got sick. I mean, again, my arms, I'm using weights when I train my bicep. I'm straining to use weights that were lighter than my warm-up weights were before I got sick. I don't know what happened there. I just lost a lot of strength.
Well, I've had to drop the weights just to spare my joints.
Yeah.
Like I used to do French curls with dumbbells with 60-pound dumbbells.
Right.
I don't go over 35 or 40 now at the most.
Just about every body part that's true for me. I can't lift the weights I used to. And on certain days, if I push the weights too hard, the next day, the joint soreness is incredible. I have to take an anti-inflammatory drug. It's so bad. So I'm past the point where I could do that. I'm just happy to be able to work out, and stay in some kind of condition. I'm not going to push it. Again, my goal is to be as healthy as possible and maintain the muscle I have. I have no interest in challenging Philly for Mr. Olympia.
I'm still having fun like a kid, training in the gym and setting goals for myself and peaking out every spring. But old age catches up with you.
Yeah,
and there's some things you just can't do anymore, or your joints, because your joints can't take them.
But what you can do is exactly what you're doing, is to set aside a certain time each year, whether it involves changes in diet or training, maybe training a little bit harder or more reps. You can kind of peak out each year, that does, without hurting your joints.
I vary the weights too. Like, I'll go up to like bent over concentration curls. Like I was using 60, and I got to where I said, I need to drop that. And I went down to 30s, just did 30s for a while, but did higher reps. And now I'm starting to go back up again. Now I'm back up to 50s. But so I vary it during the year.
Yeah.
And if I think the joints are having any problem with the weight, I drop it and I up the reps.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm still having fun.
Yeah. Well, you're doing the right thing, because I don't know if you heard, they just came out with a study. I mentioned in videos in the past, I talked about, I did this video about the Mr. Olympia a couple of years ago when Kevin Levrone made his return. And I mentioned that, the thing I noticed, first of all, his legs were really down compared to the rest of his body. Apparently he had a knee injury a couple of months before, but I didn't know that. So in the video, I suggested that the reason his legs didn't respond was the motor neurons, which are nerves, the kind of nerves that interact between muscles and the brain, or they innervate muscles. They kind of like close up, and it starts first in the legs. So sure enough, they just came out with a study just a couple of weeks ago showing most people, and when they get older, 30 to 60% of their motor neuron stimulation to their legs is gone. And this is what causes the muscle atrophy. But the good news about it is that if you continue to stimulate these motor neurons with exercise, or do what you're doing, which is kind of push the weight a little bit whenever you can, there's no reason for the motor neurons to shrivel up. So in other words, the people in that study were sedentary. They didn't work out. So if you don't work out, here's the point to remember. If you don't work out, you can expect your muscles to disappear gradually, starting at age 30. They're gonna atrophy a little bit year by year. By the time you're 60, 65, you're gonna lose about 40% of your muscle mass.
It's amazing what people that are in their 30s look like if they never trained in their life. Like they look great at 20. By age 30, they look like shit.
Well, that's when
if they're not doing any exercise or anything.
That's when, at age 30, that's when things start to change. Yeah. A woman who, osteoporosis, the bone disease, you see in a lot of older women, it begins at age 30. What you're seeing in old women is 30 to 40 years of bone degeneration.
That's why they need to lift weights, because that slows that down. Yeah.
Weight-bearing exercise helps to prevent it. and also helping to maintain some, at least a minimal level of estrogen and calcium intake. And weight bearing, all those three things will prevent osteoporosis. But if you don't, again, if you don't do anything preemptively, you can expect to have osteoporosis, especially if you're a small woman, with very light bone structure. I almost guarantee they will get osteoporosis by the time they're
I
like
see
50.
some women in their 50s in the gym that look amazing,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and they just never quit training. They look like
Well,
they did in their 30s almost.
I saw this female bodybuilder. I never met her. I saw a video of her. I think they said she's like 80 years old.
Oh yeah,
And
an African American.
yeah, an
Yeah,
African
I've
American.
seen that. I forgot her
She
name.
was, yeah, she was still training hard, and she was even teaching exercise classes.
And she looked like she was having fun like a kid.
Oh, she loved it. And she was able to move like a young girl. I mean, you'd never know she was 80 years old.
So if
I
people that are listening to this or watching this video want that same thing, they need to get your newsletter.
Right. You get to the newsletter, but I will say this. I'll give them a little tip, which should be obvious after what we are just talking about. Get this, the only true fountain of youth is resistance exercise and endurance exercise. That's the only, forget all the nostrums and the pills and the drugs. And by the way, growth hormone, contrary to popular opinion, not only does not decrease the aging process, it speeds it up. All these people, I shouldn't laugh. It's kind of pathetic. All these people that are having this growth hormone therapy to slow the aging process, they have no idea they're speeding it up tenfold. The reasons are very complex, but the one true fountain of youth, I can tell you, is exercise. It's any scientist who studies aging will agree with me.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we have right now.
Well, that's a good note to end our video on, and encourage our readers to take up that lifestyle and read your newsletter.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll see you next month, same time, same place, for your next newsletter, and I can't wait to read this one.
Okay. Great to talk to you,
And
Richard.
good luck with everything that's going on there with your surgery, or not.
Yeah, now I got to remove this fake beard that I put 3 years ago.
Okay. Have a good one, my friend.
Take care.
Bye. If you want the latest in exercise and nutrition science, then sign up for Jerry Brainum's Applied Metabolics newsletter.